Can I just confirm that everyone is happy to type in any questions that they've got at any time? I don't mind, and I will pick them up and incorporate them in. So please do interrupt me at any stage, and that works incredibly well. So what we'll do is we'll get cracking, and I will keep an eye on the chat bit just to the right-hand side, and so do put anything in there that you want to. What it would be helpful to do, just to check first of all, is the balance of primary colleagues and secondary colleagues. The principles are the same, but it was just helpful from my point of view to know who broadly which phases you are in. So if I could ask you to do the same as what Graham did just now, which was, can you tick please if you are primary? Can you go to that little man on the top? And only if you're a primary colleague, thank you, could you tick? Okay, that's fine. It's looking as though we've got a balance there. That's fine. Don't worry if you haven't. I can see that there are, we've got a balance of colleagues. That's great. So thank you. So let's get started. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through the summary of the headlines of the changes first of all, and then I'm going to take each of these areas in more detail and pick them up and talk about them in more detail as we go through the session. And so I'll take the first bit reasonably quickly, and then we'll go into them, as I say, and unpack what some of these mean in context. So the summary of the changes then, the news will have reached you that the curriculum changes as far as the national curriculum is concerned with effect from this term. It only applies to maintained, so local authority schools, so academies, free schools, other schools are not bound by the new curriculum orders. But what we're finding is that most schools are taking account of them in any case, because they're good benchmarks to be framing a curriculum offer around. Now, linked to that is the assessment without the levels. So one of the things that the department decided to do was to remove the levelling, and I'm sure again that news has reached you all as well. So this has an impact on how OFSTED teams will be making judgments about assessment when they go into schools, and I will unpick some of that as we go through. There are separate judgments for early years and the sixth form now. So this is really going back to the situation about 3 years ago when they were given separate grades. From the start of 2012 until now, the judgments have been blended in with the rest of the curriculum provision, or the rest of the overall effectiveness for inspections for the rest of the context. And what was decided was that the focus had slightly slipped in inspection reports on those two important phases. So they have come back in again. So I will again talk in more detail about those. And what I would say is that if you are secondary phase, you might think, oh, early years doesn't really apply to me, but it's still interesting to know, and I think it's actually quite important to know the spread of what's happening to our children as they go through our system. And similarly, if you're from an early years context or primary, just to have an inkling of what the headlines for the sixth form are as well. And then I'm sure it's not news to anyone that lesson observations and the judgments made on individual lesson observations have gone. Huge relief all round on that one. So I'll be talking about why we're still going into lessons and the purpose of those when we go through. Okay. Further changes are really this slide and the next slide is really emphasizing new orders and new priorities that have been there actually for some time. But the safeguarding and child protection new work that came in from April this year is now effective from September. It's ongoing, the outcomes for the disadvantaged pupils, able pupils, pupils with a disability and those who have special educational needs. That's an ongoing agenda item as far as the standards work is concerned. When we talk about disadvantaged, it's used in quite a particular sense here. It's used in the way of, to mean precisely those children who are in receipt of pupil premium funding. Okay, so it's financially disadvantaged. There's the continued emphasis on progress in English and maths. And one of the things they've worried about, not surprisingly, has the focus on the English and maths in the past meant that the rest of the curriculum has got distorted. And I think Ofsted found that in some cases it has. And so now they're asking us to pay attention again. I mean, we always did, but actually we've got to make a real note of it now, the breadth of the curriculum for our youngsters. Now that's largely up to the schools, what that looks like, but there will be concerns raised if everything is distorted around getting the level 4s in Key Stage 2 and the Cs at Key Stage 4. I'll pick that up again a bit later. Okay. And then the final summary of the changes is the work around alternative provision. So we're taking an even closer look at those students who are off-site for any part, all or any part of their time at school. The school is responsible for that child's, keep monitoring that child's progress, their behaviour and safety, including safeguarding, and to be doing something about it if it's not going as expected for that child. There's a much stronger focus on making sure that alternative provision actually meets the needs of the children, that they don't become invisible. The spiritual, moral, social and cultural development, this was strengthened in the 2012 framework, the big change to the framework. And again, this time it has had some changes to it, and it's been brought into the mainstream guidance along with discussion about collective worship and religious education. And my understanding of that is to make sure that students and young people generally are really allowed to encounter alternative points of view or alternative cultural ways of thinking. But I'll unpack that a bit later as well, and similarly with the collective worship and religious education. And governance too, there's some additional work around governance in relation to the above. Okay, so that is a summary of the changes. I'm just going to pause there for a moment just to see whether there is anything that people would like to check with me. I'll just pause there for 30 seconds. Any questions so far?